Welcome to another episode of Distory. My name is Kirk from WaltChrisCarp.com, and with me as always is Kate, the Disney Cicerone. Tonight we are going to dive back into the Walt Disney World queue, picking up just before the explosive room is where we left you last episode. I didn't think that it would take this long to get through the Walt Disney World queue, but it has been a quite the passage. So because we've been waiting so long, Kate, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing good. I think that it took us both by surprise just how much there is in this queue and how many tiny little details there are that are just everywhere. So I found way more than I ever thought I would, and I found a few things that I'm still mysteries, and I think you had a few of those too. Right?
I had none of those. I know everything.
Well,
no. There's you know what? There's a lot of things that are just kind of like, oh, it's that. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, but there was also some things that, what I always like is this forced me to go through the queue multiple times over the past couple of weeks, visiting Walt Disney World. And, every single time I went back, I got another exciting angle picture because that queue moves fast and they wouldn't even let me into like the explosive room area. So I did my best to cover it, and I still was able to find some really good nuggets.
Ah, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, before we dive into our topic, I do want to mention that I did just a little bit of looking over what the music is for the queue, because I know we did that for Jungle Cruise, and I don't want to go into deep detail about it, but I do want to mention that it's the same queue music that's been there since 1987 that we have now. The loop runs right around 20 minutes 45 seconds. The previous one was 19 minutes and 9 seconds because they just added one song to it. So that's the only difference between its original queue music and now what they have. I won't read you the entire list, but I did make one on Spotify of as many of the songs as I could find on Spotify, because a lot of them just aren't on there. Because they're Disney original and they're not licensed for Spotify. So I made one that's, if you search for Disney Cicerone on Spotify, you'll see our Distory radio. There's a couple of playlists there for different queue music. So you can find it there for Big Thunder Mountain. But there's a couple ones. They do have Pecos Bill is a song on there, which we'll get into a little bit more of that most likely later this episode. And they have things like Old Yeller, Old Betsy, a lot of old things, Rock Candy Mountain, Buffalo Gals, and then you do see in kind of more of the general Frontierland music, there is the Apple Dumpling Gang theme song included there.
For those that are listening, my eyes rolled so hard you could hear them clang.
And I think that is an important question that we need to ask, Kirk. Did you watch the Apple Dumpling Gang?
Your husband, Elliot, sent me a message and asked, and to which I replied, guess how many times I'm going to watch it after the episode? 0. Because I refuse. I'm never watching that thing, dude. I feel like you've put me through the Iliad version of it.
I'm sorry, but I think you should watch it because it'll give you so much content. Anyway, you do you. But I do have something before we step into...
This is story time?
Story time, yes.
Oh, ready or O-R-E not.
Oh.
Kate's got a good story. Family story.
And this one's gold, I have to say.
Oh. Kate was funny. Yay!
It happens once in a while. So I knew that my dad did work in a mine at one point in his history. And so I went to go ask him about it and, say if he would share a story or two about it, just to give us a little bit of context of what was it like to work in the mines from somebody I knew and loved, obviously. So my dad worked in a mine in Colorado in 1973. So my dad's not that old. This is not the 1800s. So just keep that in mind.
My father worked he was a fuser.
He did have something to do with the ore carts. So we'll just, so he said, I'm going to read it as he wrote it to me, just to give you his own words. So he said, I took a job in a Colorado molybdenum mine and worked 30 days as a newbie laying really heavy railroad tracks. He didn't last long, we'll just say that. I was 1.5 miles underground. It was a constant 50 degrees, pitch black, water dripping off the tunnel walls, and suffice to say, it sucked. My dad used that word because I used it when I was 11, and he used to tell me not to say that word. And I was like, it's the only word. It's the best word to describe what's happening. And then he picked it up, and now he uses it for me. So I think that's cute. Anyway, he said the only lights the engineer had was the small headlamp affixed to your hard hat, which could easily come off the hard hat. The only electrical power to run the locomotive was a trolley pole the engineer has leaned out the cab to pull on a rope to engage it overhead power lines for a couple of lights and brakes. All in all, it was not a very safety-oriented system. Surprise, surprise. At the beginning of our shift above ground, we had to pick up small silver dollar-sized brass piece stamped with our own number from the board, like we saw at the beginning.
Yeah, those tags, yeah.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the shift, we always, without exception, had to rehang our own brass piece stamped with our own number on the board to assure all miners returned to the surface safely. If your brass tag was missing, more than likely the outcome was fatal. Hard rock mining is extremely dangerous. He had reported stories as to why we had to replace so many tracks, because that's what he was busy doing, I guess, were trains frequently coming off on the way to the 3-story rock crusher. And often entire trains full of 90 tons of rock would end up in the crusher, killing the engineer. So this was like a common occurrence.
Oh, jeez.
Mm-hmm. After my 30 days intro period, they announced I was in luck and being promoted to mine train engineer. My dad was a mine train engineer for a little bit.
That's so fun.
Yeah. And he said, yikes. I worked a few shifts. All of my shifts were graveyards. They said, okay, you're on your own. My first few trips loaded with ore went okay, and I said, I got this on my next trip. They loaded my 30-car mine train up with 90 tons of rock, and I accelerated to the crusher, which was about a mile away. En route, the track was very bumpy, causing the power pole with the wire to bounce, disconnecting power, lights, and brakes from the locomotive. I went around one final bend, and the power pole came off. I was going about 30 to 40 miles per hour. I leaned out and tried to shine my little headlamp outside the racing locomotive, and it comes off my hard hat and bounced onto the floor. Oh, my God. So here I was in an uncontrollable train, no lights or brakes, racing out of control to the crusher. It's very much like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway.
Dude, he's straight up on a runaway mine train.
Yeah. He said, I grabbed my headlamp from the floor. I'm not really sure how he managed that. Maybe he just caught it just in time. Leaned and saw the trolley pole roll bouncing off the sides of the tunnel wall, and after a few misses, grabbed it. I now saw many lights from the crusher a few blocks away. By the grace of God, I managed to get power restored, slam on the brakes, and avoid certain death, as me and the entire train would have descended in the 3 stories down into the crusher. I left that shift and quit when I got to the surface.
Holy cow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So
that
my
is a
dad,
wild story.
The runaway mine train miner, but giving us a really accurate picture of just how dangerous it was to work in these mines, even the 70s. This was not the 1800s. So
yeah, that's crazy.
And I didn't even think about the fact that your like headlamp could just like fall off, and then you have no light. That's also scary.
Yeah.
So
that is crazy.
Yeah.
That is I mean, well, the disconnecting and like, it's still, I don't know. You would figure that there's some sort of way to ensure that even if it got disconnected, it wouldn't go far.
Right. But apparently not.
Oh my gosh.
They didn't seem that concerned with
you know
safety.
What? Here's something that's so dumb, but I have to say it. The fact that it's so cold and so dark makes them horrifying. Everything about a mine is the worst thing in the world. I've watched that one guy on TikTok who like slides through caves and stuff, and I'm out. I'm so far out. That is like my greatest fear. That is horrifying. Well, I'm glad your dad's okay. That is a crazy thing.
Yeah, and I mean, he obviously remembers it very vividly because he almost passed away. But luckily he did not, and I'm here today after that. But I was watching a YouTube video of somebody exploring the abandoned Tropico mine, which is where all these mine tailings came from. And he actually goes inside it and walks around, and like there's still like the ore cart tracks, but they've been all like bent and warped and stuff. It's crazy. Like I wouldn't advocate going and exploring these places. They're very, very dangerous. But it was very interesting to see inside of what they look like. Anyway, that being said, shall we move on to another dangerous mining topic, which is the explosives magazine room of
Light it up.
We do get a little bit of like an introduction to this room when we're walking in with the explosives sign that says explosives, handle carefully, keep fire away, condensed rules for handling. And I don't know, Kirk, if you found any, but I was definitely looking up old safety posters for these kinds of things that might have looked like this, and I came up empty. So I don't know if this is something they just came up with.
Yeah, I didn't find one that looked like that. No.
Yeah. So it also says how to avoid loss of fingers, life, and job. So it says do not shoot at explosives, do not bite fuse caps with teeth, find a safe hiding spot before detonating explosives, always yell fire in the hole so everyone in the hole can hear you. Avoid flames near explosive except when detonating. Do not store explosive near food or drinking water. Do not wear wool socks when handling electric detonators to avoid shock and explosion. Mind friction when handling nitroglycerin. Do not bump, drop, or throw. If lit fuse by accident, run away and don't come back. Stop and think, then proceed accordingly. It says if you follow our instructions, you will secure satisfactory results. Which all those seem like pretty good advice, quite honestly, for explosives.
Yeah. The light the fuse by accident, run away, and don't come back is one of my favorite lines.
Yeah, that one definitely seems more of a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
So I did look up kind of some of the things they did to try to keep from exploding in a mine back in the day. And I did find one that said they did something of rock dusting, because explosions accounted for approximately 84% of all disaster-related mine deaths from 1911 through 1920. So this is a little bit later than our time period, but still. To address the risk of coal dust explosions, this is a coal mine, given the methane-rich environment, miners began applying a layer of rock dust over the coal dust to create an inert mixture. So that was something in coal mines that they used to do. But explosions accounting for 84% of all of them, this was a big deal. So it makes sense that they would include this as such a major part of this queue.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is probably lack of training. You know, I mean, you're handing a lot of people a lot of trust with some dangerous things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although we are going to see that they do run some training later on in the queue.
They do. It's true. I have just a little bit of, I want to say, I don't know if this exactly what this is, but this is kind of what we're walking into. This is the original Imagineering. I guess not, I wouldn't call it concept art so much as like computer generated art of what it should look like.
It looks like Tom Cruise is kidnapping those kids. I mean, give them back, Tom.
It does.
What is going on?
It's like a dad. Why is he wearing his sunglasses inside the queue?
That's what I'm saying. He's a criminal. That's why. And that other dude's like, I don't want any part of this, man. I'm just trying to ride the ride.
I'm just by myself. Yeah.
Seriously, what in the world?
This one doesn't have any people in it, but you can also see.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah,
Tom got away.
The intention was for them to have all the stuff, the supplies for detonating explosives, kind of in these cabinets. But as we can see, they do have this. They do have supplies inside cabinets, but I don't know about you, Kirk, but I barely noticed the stuff inside in the cabinets. Did you notice them like at all?
Oh, I did.
Okay.
Oh, did I?
Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, because there's lots of stuff on the outsides. Do we want to do outsides first and then do cabinets? Because I know you have pictures. From the outside section.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to do that first? Okay, so I'm just going to start rattling through, and then whatever you want to add or tag on, feel free. So we do see lots of tubular lamps. We also get a blasting powder controlled by Imperial Powder Co. So Imperial Powder Co. It seems to be the number one supplier of detonation powder, because we see that barrel quite a few times. This is one of my favorites of the dynamite stick boxes. B and B, or bomb and bomb.
Yeah, I
The
love
last
that.
name in explosives.
And you can see I have here an actual, this is a real picture of the mines of a miner from back in the day with a real explosives box that says Hercules powder on it. But you can see where they got the design for these boxes from very, very accurately.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Again, here's the Imperial powder in a drum instead. Oh, do you want to do, because this is like Imagineering, so you'd be all for the fusing cage names.
Okay, so these are the fusers. This is a list of what they say are the fusers, but these are all people that worked in Imagineering. So we have Little Big Gibson is Blaine Gibson, who is a sculptor. We have talked about him before for Pirates of the Caribbean. He was one of the people who sculpted virtually everything or oversaw the sculpting of a lot of things in the Disney parks. So he also worked on things for Big Thunder. Then we have Jolly the Kid is Bob Jolly, who oversaw the painting of the mountain. We talked about him in previous episodes. Buckaroo Burke is Pat Burke, who did the set design. Calamity Clem is Clem Hall, who did some concept art for Big Thunder. You can see what it looks like here. This one is interesting. I don't know if you saw this one, Kirk, but they have like almost look like skeletons of miners.
Yeah,
that are like things
that are lifting and dumping the ore into a bucket.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting? Because we never got any skeletons on this one. I think they kept those to Pirates of the Caribbean. Skittish Skip is Skip Lang, who did sculpting and rendering of the model. So he's hanging out in this one here. And then Wild Wolf Yorger is Fred Yorger, who was known as Disney's rock work expert. So if you see rocks and how they look really kind of realistic, he was probably behind it or trained somebody to do it. Matchstick Mark is, of course, Mark Davis with the Western River Expedition and the original mine train concept. Mama Hutchinson, I like this one because it's in Women's History Month, so we can just touch on this one for a second. Mama Hutchinson is Helena Hutchinson, who is the WDI's fur expert. She worked in the figure finishing department at Imagineering since the mid-1960s. And worked on every attraction they did from Pirates of the Caribbean. She did Country Bear Jamboree up until she retired in the 1990s. And she looks like that. That is Helena Hutchinson. But she was the resident fur expert and was especially good with like difficult figurines that had a lot of animation. So if you like something with fur on it at Disney, you can thank Helena Hutchinson.
It's that
was a weird.
We're getting really niche in our audience group. Are we trying to hit an algorithm here?
Yeah, but so those are all those people that you see there. Those are just all Imagineers that had a big impact on the building of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Disney history.
Yeah, there they are. Oh, we've seen. Oh, you know what? No, this is the first time that we're talking about them. The light 'em and hide explosive boxes, which this is the majority of the dynamite boxes are part of this light 'em and hide.
Yeah, and we see them at the end of the queue too.
Do you have the photo of the other? Oh wow, yours is like nice.
Yeah, I got artistic with this one.
Yeah, you did, dude. Look at that.
I'm mad about it.
Do you have the one that's like right to the left of that has Thunder Mesa call out to it?
Yeah,
I know you took a picture of it. I just couldn't find it.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, there it is.
So that's on another shelf, but it says Western River Explosives, 40% strength. But of course, that is referring to Western River Expedition, which is what this ride essentially replaced. So a little nod to Mark Davis there as well, which I'm pretty sure that Western River, isn't it kind of across from those fuser signs? So it's almost like Western River's looking at Mark Davis.
Yeah. I mean,
I hadn't really thought about that.
It's technically looking, yeah.
Yeah, so he's kind of like across from the ride that he never got, which is both sad.
Look at the empty lot. Look at it, Mark.
It's just sad.
It's a disappointment, isn't it? It's like Walt Disney gets to have his window overlook Cinderella Castle. Mark gets to look at empty trees.
That is sad. There's a note that says blasting caps handle carefully, and it says do not store or load with any explosives. And then it's stored next to a bucket of explosives. slash dynamite on the shelf. So it's like somebody's clearly not paying attention, and I think that's part of the storytelling as well. So here's the blasting caps. It says, do not store or load with any explosives, literally sitting in the magazine room with all the explosives. And then there was one more box, since we're kind of talking about boxes. Do you want to mention this one with the Old Faithful?
Oh, is that a call out to the geyser, and then the fact that the one that we have here is Old Unfaithful?
Yeah, well, the one that was in Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland was Old Unfaithful.
Was Old Unfaithful.
And then this one says Old Faithful, which obviously refers to the Yellowstone version that is faithful.
Boo. Don't do real ones. Do fake ones.
About every 90 minutes it explodes, or erupts rather, in Yellowstone National Park. But it ties also, you're right, to the storyline of geysers for this attraction as well, because there's just geysers everywhere outside this one.
That's it. You know what? I guarantee if I pulled 100 guests leaving Big Thunder and asked them, why does the mine train go haywire, particularly at the end of the attraction? Not a single person will be able to explain it to me.
Nope.
None. Zero. So we've missed some storytelling elements there, and we'll get there. But the geysers play a huge part, and water in general plays a huge part in everything that happens to Tumbleweed and to Big Thunder here in Orlando.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I did see up on the shelves, I don't know if you noticed this.
An elf?
More lamps. The lamps.
Oh, all right, sorry. There's a lot.
There's a lot of lamps, but these ones are really interesting to me because they signal it's not safe to enter the blasting site. The red ones, like in Disneyland, but I don't remember seeing any signs in Walt Disney World that say it's not safe to enter with red lights.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me that they did that here, but they don't explain it at all. But those definitely...
And here you thought DCA was the only place with a lamplight lounge.
Yeah, but there is some spools also of wire up on that shelf as well that would just go with the storytelling of
and
Dynamite.
Why did they pick one to be the reflecting brass plate style too? Because all the other ones are the same, and that's a fancy one. That's for fancy people.
Because then it directs the light in a specific direction rather than it concentrates all the light heading in one direction because it's reflecting off of this metal piece that's attached to the back. So that's a great question. I also don't see a lot of miners using that particular method of lighting. They always use just the tubular ones, right? So safety ones, depending.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of miners, I mean, would hold their own lamp on their head or candle on their head, whatever, a lot of them wanted to be hands-free because it was a very physical, laborious job. You really couldn't be holding on to something.
Right. Which is something that I found on top. You probably found this toolbox, right? With the spool. It's got a wrench on top of it.
Yes.
Okay. So it's sitting right on top of like where the fusers are. But do you see this little, I'll zoom in on it. Do you see this little thing here? I looked for this forever, and it looks like to me like a very primitive lamp because it's got a handle, it's got a reservoir, and it's got something that looks like you would light on the top.
It looks like a handheld oil lamp.
Mm-hmm.
At the top looks like a fuse that has been lit multiple times, so I'm assuming that's probably accurate.
Which is then interesting because they're just like, it's almost as if somebody just kind of carelessly put a lamp on top of a shelf that's holding a whole bunch of sticks of dynamite.
Yes, that's the joke.
Well, yeah, but how many people are getting that joke? How many people are noticing that?
None. Us. That's it.
I'm getting to a shelf of candles next. So what else do you have for this area before we get to that shelf? Because
cabinet time.
Cabinet
time to go into the cabinet.
I'm excited because
you know what? Before cabinets, let's do some plungers, dude. Are we doing plungers? Can we do a plunger?
Plungers.
Yeah, all right. Don't have to be like that. Well, first of all, the one thing I love about this plunger is you can actually see the posts, which would create that electrical connection. So if you were a fuser and you were laying this down, you can connect that on there. And these are functional when they did the interactive Q-Re theme. So if you actually crank this, and once it gets to a level that says fire, you can press down the plunger, and it will typically have an effect outside. Usually it involves some sort of like steam/fog. So it's really cool, and usually there's like a sound effect as well. So very fun. I've never seen anybody do all of them, and most of them aren't functioning, but still pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's outside to the left, just past the geysers. So the geysers are like right here. That building's like...
Right. And so this is one of like, I think there's 3, maybe 4. There's a couple different spots that can actually erupt. Here's another one that you can see there's a hole in that box there, and that's where smoke will come out.
There's actually one outside, like if you don't even want to go on the attraction and you don't want to go on the queue, where they have disability access service. So like basically the exit ramp has one that you can go and just use because it's in the exit.
Oh, let's I have a picture of that too.
Outside.
Watch. Ah.
Tom's back. The kids are gone, and he's got no sunglasses. You're not fooling anybody, Tom. Get out of there, lady. He's unsafe.
Maybe that was the single guy. But then why wasn't he going? I don't know. That was anyway.
I'm telling you. Telling you.
Did you call him Tom? I feel like Tom is appropriate for this because of how they like to use the word Tommy for virtually everything.
Tommy knockers, Tommy sticks.
We'll find it.
Anyway. All right. Cabinets. Lots of fuses. Get excited. Lots of braided, coiled fuses. So extra long, obviously. And these are the electrical kinds, which should be stored. These are adjacent to the electrical plungers that we have. Now, because I'm into plungers apparently. I know you want to see what's inside the fuser cage.
Yes,
did you ever look
please.
inside?
I did one time, but I never caught any pictures of it, so I haven't been able to study it much.
Ho, ho, ho. Oh, Kate, my Kate. Let me get this. You're going to like this one.
Oh, my gosh.
So first of all, there's an open plunger, so that's exciting. But you don't care about that. I know you.
I know. I'm looking
Staking your claim, Chandler's magnificent drilling machine. Do you want to bring us back to Mr. Jason Chandler?
Oh my gosh. So his Barnabas T. Bullion purchased a drilling machine from Jason Chandler to bore all the holes for the mines in Big Thunder. And he was
remember we saw on the
Bay.
Yeah, we saw on that bulletin board last week that SEA letterhead to Barnabas about that drilling machine. So
that's exciting.
I need to go back and get like the bottom part because I can't see everything, but isn't that cool? So that's on the one side. There's also this looks like it's filled with some sort of fuel. And then there's shackles. I'm not sure what the deal is with that.
Oh, that ties into stuff that comes up later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then the last point of interest, and now this isn't actually a really good period piece because this is actually more of the 1900s. So in the early 1920, this would be a miner style headlamp where they would be able to remove an electrical lamp and then replace it. So it's not exactly to period, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm showing you the ones that they would have had in the 1800s that more have like open flame on them, which is wild.
Oh my God, dude, I love that picture.
Right? And they have a donkey friend. So
listen, anybody who has just flames on their head, I am a fan of.
Yeah. That gentleman's modeling that candle on his hat.
Well, I mean, dude, it's a dangerous job, but somebody's got to do it. Well, dude, this is like an actual advertisement for a place in Iowa that you can buy one of these holders and the hat. So Get excited. That's
you too.
Merry Christmas.
Your very own.
King will be walking around at night.
Hey, when the power goes out again with the next ice storm, that would be handy to have.
There you go.
Probably not a safe option, but that's fine.
No, because the next thing is the subterroscopes.
Well, before we get the subterroscopes, I'm pretty sure we actually there's things that are above the shelf there. So there is a shelf with a fire bucket, a glass of oil jars, which I'll get to in just a second. Then there is also a hand auger used for drilling dynamite into rock. So you would just it's kind of like a T shape, and it has just a drill head on the bottom, and then you just crank it to make that for the dynamite. And then there's also an axe, a crate, some more blasting caps, a shovel. So just tools that you would use that they might have been retired. So I did look up the oil jars, because you see a lot of those in Radiator Springs racers. They have a whole bottle house, because I asked my dad about this, and he said that, cars, you basically used to just have to, when you fill up with gas, you'd also put oil in your car, because they just burn through oil so fast. So having glass oil containers was really, really popular in the 50s. And I was like, well, this is older than that. So I was like, well, when did they start having these glass oil jars? And I did find some classic antique ones, and I looked around. This is actually an inconsistency with this queue. They didn't have glass jars. They didn't start being used until the 1910s because of a shortage of tin for the war. But before that, they carried their oil in tin containers, and they didn't have glass until World War I, essentially. So then they became very, very prevalent virtually everywhere, and you could see a lot of these glass containers that would have oil, so you could fill up, or in their case, oil for all the machinery they were using.
I couldn't figure out for the life of me if they use this for oil, but that was my guess.
Yeah, that looks like for oil from my perspective, yeah. Anyway, now we could go to the subterrascopes, and goodness, I went down the rabbit hole with this one, because it's the foreman's post is technically what this is. So this is supposed to be where the foreman can be keeping an eye on the mines and all the mine shafts and everything that's happening, and take notes about what's going on down in the mines.
Would you like me to pull up the foreman's log?
Yes, please. I'm very excited for this, because this is so important to the storytelling, and almost nobody ever reads this because you just get by it so fast you can't.
Well, it's also hard to read. I'm just going to be honest. It's cursive, and it's very smushy.
This is like a work week, right? It's a full work week for this foreman's log, which is what it says at the top. Monday at 4:30 p.m., men working hard is the note. So it does kind of like the day, the time, the note. Tuesday, 11:25 a.m., too many candles lit. 1:05 p.m. the same day, unauthorized blast destroyed lens must be replaced on next shift. I'm thinking he means the lens in the subterrascope.
That's exactly what I thought, because I was like, what other lens? It wouldn't be a camera, and it wouldn't be, they wouldn't refer to lamps as having lenses, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's a subterrascope. Wednesday at 7:22 a.m. is the misuse of tools. Thursday at 10:10 a.m., temperatures rising near 120, almost too hot to work. And I was like, 120?
I like the almost too hot to work.
I'm like, 120, I'm not working. I'm hardly living. So I was like, wow. 3:24 p.m. the same day, mirror fogged up. And it says ratify immediately. And it should be rectify immediately. But really interestingly, there is one. So I want to mention before we have to look inside these things and kind of do it. But one of the scenes that is inside one of them is a guy who blows on the lens, like fogs up the lens and then polishes it. So I wonder if that's related to that. So there's a scene for that. Friday at 7:43 a.m., shadows and shaft in between shifts. 12:01 p.m., ore cart tipped and spilled contents when no one was near. 9:06 p.m., Tommyknockers cleared out mine. So obviously the Tommyknockers were making some mischief, which we talked about are kind of like little leprechaun-esque figures that make mischief in the mine. Saturday, 6:38 a.m., the miners are on edge after yesterday. 11:56 a.m., some miners took an early lunch. Again, unacceptable. Remember there was that note about that on the bulletin board?
Yep.
How nobody's allowed to take an early lunch. Sunday, 2:45 p.m., unsafe and careless dynamite use. Stopped work for an impromptu safety lesson. This again...
safety lessons.
Mm-hmm. This ties into what you actually see in the thing. And I have a picture of the filming from this. They actually filmed all these, but you can see he's holding a stick of dynamite that's about to erupt, and he's trying to like read instructions for it while the dynamite is lit. So I think that's what that's referring to, is this scene that you see inside them, which we'll talk more about that in a second. Monday, 3:42 p.m., donkey knocked over blasting powder and no one noticed. Sent down cleanup crew before someone got hurt. 5:02 p.m., work resumed in area. Tuesday, 8:13 a.m., men congregated around view hole. I can't see what they're looking at. And that probably alludes to the one, there is a scene with a woman who is pulling gold out of various parts of her clothing. So I think that might have to do with it, if I had to guess.
That's definitely what it is.
10:30 a.m., nothing out of the ordinary going on now. Work, work, work. 4:27 p.m., workers are acting, and then there's something scratched out, and then it says unusual. So I don't know what that means. Do you have any guesses about that, Kirk? What they scratched out?
No, I don't know. It's again, too difficult to read.
Yeah, it's like it's totally obscured.
I'm thinking it's alluding to the fact that they found gold and they didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, something. Because, yeah, in 10:58 p.m., the next one, it says, new vein of gold discovered by miners and hid by miners. So
right.
Now the miners have found gold. So that's why they were acting unusual, is because they were going to smuggle some gold.
They were going to steal it.
Wednesday, 5 p.m., 2 miners stealing the same gold. Bullet destroyed new lens. And then, of course, then at the end, there's just Barnabas T. Bullion, founder, G. Willikers, foreman, which we talked about previously, and Big Thunder Mining Co. Under Big Thunder since 1850. The drafts that you can see there's shafts. There's 3 of them that you can look in. There's shaft 19, drift number 30, and the prospector's pit. And they are made in, the subterroscopes are made in New York City, New York, which I think is really interesting. I'm not really sure what the connection is with New York, but that's where they're made. And I have a little bit of the concept art for them as well. This one says shaft 7, which actually we don't have a shaft 7, so that's funny. But if you look inside these, did you get a lot of any of the footage or anything from inside them? I have some pictures.
There was a YouTube video, but I can describe the scenes. It's basically like old-timey with, usually it was like the same one character, man, that you already had that still of, who was like holding the dynamite. And like at one point he finds a gold nugget, and a woman who's next to him basically comes by and grabs it and walks away from him.
And these were all filmed specifically for this. So these are not from any Disney movies or anything. They filmed these for this attraction. But they definitely make them look kind of like, Apple Dumpling Gang and all these other... I'm just going to find all the ways I can to say it. Just saying. But
I wish I was in a mine right now.
But it's interesting to me that they're just very short little scenes. They're like, 5 to 10 seconds long. You can see this is a woman who is pulling gold out from all the different parts of her clothing where she had hid it. And then she was like biting it to make sure it was real. And then putting it in this bucket. So she was kind of clearly stealing it.
It reminds me of those like stereoscopes or mutoscopes or anything that involved like flipping kind of images in like a penny arcade. That's the kind of style that the subterroscope kind of looks like.
Right.
If you're trying to visualize it.
Yeah, you can look in there, and they're just like little scenes, and then it like ends, and then it'll start a new scene in another couple seconds. So
I have never seen these operating. I never got to see them.
I saw one time operating. So yeah, same kind of experience. But it's interesting that what's happening with the foreman's log is kind of like alluding to not only other things we saw in the queue and the mountain, but also what's happening in these subterroscopes. So I love the storytelling of that it's all kind of connected for what's going on in the mines. This is how they described it, was to look down into the mine through a series of lenses and mirrors that connect you with the activity of the miners working thousands of feet below your feet. That's how they described what a subterroscope is. And that's all I have on subterroscopes, unless you have anything else.
No, we showed that patent, which was on the bulletin board earlier of them, but that's all I have. On top of one of these subterroscopes, I did find this. And this wrench actually repeats a couple of times. So it's how do you pronounce that?
Oh, Cochise?
Yeah, Cochise. There you go. From the trade catalogs of the Cochise Rock and Drill Manufacturing Company, which was a real manufacturing company. I think it's Cochise. Let's go with Cochise.
Okay.
From LA in California. And they made rock hammers, drills for mining and quarrying, wet stoppers to clean out the water tube of a wet stopper drill, and wet stopping drills. The only problem I have with this, and this is from the National Museum of American History, the Smithsonian, is that this is from the 1900s. So I don't know why, out of all wrenches, I guess maybe that's the only one that was prevalent that is somewhat of the time period, and it's mining specific.
Yeah.
Mining adjacent wrenches. I mean, guys, I hate to put a wrench in this thing, but I'm going to put this mining one. Okay, cool.
Yeah, maybe somebody was just like, look, I found a wrench that was used in like actual mines. And they're like, great. And like nobody checked the time period. They're just like,
put it in, Cochise.
I mean, they put those oil jars in there, and those weren't accurate either. So, and the stove, remember? The stove was like later too. So
you love that stove, dude.
I do love the stove. The round oak stove. So let's head to this bulletin board that has the map of Big Thunder with a couple of notes next to it. The way that they described this was view the longitudinal section through Big Thunder Mountain showing the ventilation and air quality systems leading to the shafts, adits, galleries, and levels from 1880. This map does show where the autocanaries are, the subterroscopes, and the air shafts are located. And then I did look at what an adit was, because I'd heard that term before, but I never knew. And that's a horizontal passage leading into a mine for the purposes of access or drainage. So it's like horizontal versus a vertical shaft is an adit.
Okay.
Yeah. So getting our mining terminology correct here.
Well, if we don't have it right, they'll come after us.
Yeah.
Luckily, they're all miners. We could take them.
I love it. I wouldn't take on a miner.
No, who would?
I do have a couple of things. I won't say like every single thing that's on here.
Thank goodness, Kate.
Thanks.
I feel like this is the foreman's log all over again.
The foreman's log was relevant. You needed to know all the things. But there are a couple things that you'll recognize not only from the assay boards that we talked about last week, but there's Coyote Gallery, which is like Coyote Canyon in Disneyland. So there's that. You're looking at Prospector's Pit there, which is, again, one of the ones for the subterroscope. Behemoth Gorge, Bat Cave, which is very much, that's Rattler's Nest. So that would be like the rattlesnakes that are on Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland. The Bat Cave is very much, we go through the Bat Cave, but that also alludes to the Mark Davis concept art for bats. You want to talk about that one? Because that one's cool.
Yeah, Rainbow Caverns is awesome. Not only do we get our little call out for our first lift hill, which goes through Rainbow Caverns, but of course, back to Nature's Wonderland again.
Mm-hmm. And there's Tumbleweed Tunnel. So that's like the town of Tumbleweed, Little Spark Shaft, some future expansion places, Rabbit Foot Fissure, which we saw back on the assay board, and Moon Ridge, which is from the Apple Dumpling Gang, because that was the mine they went in, was Moon Ridge too. Broken Kirk. And there was a spur shaft. And there's a Mine Shaft 71, which is a nod to the Magic Kingdom's opening year as well. And those are the main ones that I thought were interesting. I don't know if you have any other ones, Kirk, that you want to mention.
No, I'm looking at these years because now you're making me think like I found Shaft 71. I'm like looking all over. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are like some opening years of things? It's numbers matter.
Well, do you have anything else on this map, or should we move to the other side of the board here?
I'm bored with this. Let's move on. No, I'm not. I actually like that. That's really fun.
Well, do you know about the Can Girls? Why the Can Girls are there?
No. I mean, I just think kind of like Golden Horseshoe and Can Girls. Obviously, Mark Davis uses as gag quite a bit, but give me the real deal.
I have a theory that this area here is all tied into Pecos Bill, and Pecos Bill was largely in the Golden Horseshoe. That was part of the Golden Horseshoe Review, was telling the story of Pecos Bill and Slue-Foot Sue and all of that. And the Can Girls were the big attraction for the Golden Horseshoe Review back in the day. If you haven't watched it, there's full-length ones all over the place, because it was one of the longest-running shows in Disney history, and it was a really wonderful one. And there was Wally Bogue was in it. And I think that there's also a version that has Walt Disney in it in terms of overseeing it for an episode of World of Color that they did. And that one has Annette Funicello, and it has Ed Hume. And so that one is a really wonderful one to see if you are not familiar with the Golden Horseshoe Review. But I think the Can Girls are from that. Do you want to talk about the buffalo a little bit?
I don't know anything about the buffalo.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about the buffalo. Okay, so get ready. I have a little bit of a jump scare. So Golden Horseshoe Review. Ta-da! There's a buffalo.
Wait, they used to do that in the show?
Yeah, and it was like two guys I think I have a bigger one. There was two guys together making this, and part of the gag was like they kind of came out of their costume part way because they weren't working together. But there was a guy in the front for this kind of derpy looking buffalo with these winky eyes. And then there was a guy making the back part of the buffalo.
I love that. That's so fun.
And so it was part of the scene, which the scene wasn't exactly like culturally sensitive. So just FYI about that. But yeah, they did have buffalo in that one. And so I think this is an allusion to that Golden Horseshoe Review. There's a couple other buffaloes that it could be connected to. If you remember that there was going to be buffalo inside the Western River expedition, and they were kind of looking over some little prairie dogs that were popping up next to them. And
okay.
Kirk, I know you know where this scene is from.
Well, I mean, in Living with the Land, we have, is that where they used the scene?
Mm-hmm.
They just repurposed it for Living with the Land? Even the hooves of the mighty buffalo.
Mm-hmm. They almost directly just took that scene from Mark Davis's Western River expedition and then put it in Living with the Land.
Oh, that makes me like that scene even more.
Mm-hmm.
See, I didn't even know I was making a shirt for Mark Davis.
Yeah. So it also could allude to that kind of lost Western River expedition. And then I will mention that there is like a giant stuffed buffalo that's inside the Bonanza Outfitters in Disneyland. So buffalo are just very much part of Frontierland culture.
And Buff from the Country Bears.
That's right. Yeah. So lots of buffalo in Frontierland. Do you want to read what it says there? Can you read it?
Yeah. Wounds, illnesses, or missing limbs are not acceptable excuses to miss a work shift. Signed, your foreman.
Gee willikers. Then we have the next one. Do you want to read the next note?
All friends, come celebrate my marriage to the prettiest lady in Tumbleweed, my wife Sue, at the Gold Dust Saloon. Drinks are on you. Signed, Bill. Pecos Bill.
So,
and we do have a Gold Dust Saloon in the town, the flooded town of Tumbleweed. That does exist.
Exactly right. So it's giving us context for the people. I don't know, if you go on Big Thunder in the daytime versus night, there is a change in Tumbleweed, which we'll look at a little bit later. But the lights are on in the saloon at night, and you can see people dancing in it. That's Pecos Bill and his new wife, Slue-Foot Sue, dancing and living it up with the people of Tumbleweed in the evening. So this is all storytelling to make that make sense.
Can we pause here for a second? Because
sure,
I went on a Pecos Bill, a little bit of a deep dive.
I'm always up for a deep dive of Pecos Bill. I'm ready.
So
bring it.
For those that don't know, Pecos Bill was you'll like this because you love covered wagons, you Oregoner. Pecos Bill's origin story is that he was traveling with his family over in a covered wagon, and the wagon gets disrupted, and as a little baby falls into the Pecos River, and that's where he gets the nickname Pecos Bill. He gets adopted by a group of coyotes, hence why when we see things like coyote pits and shafts, and actually a little bit later on, we're going to say you can eat like a coyote happens on a later poster. So there's all going to be these tie-ins with Pecos Bill and his origin story. But his wife is interesting too. So Pecos Bill meets Slue-Foot Sue. Hang on, where's my pictures of? Yes. Oh, that's a great one. I love that one. Of her. Hang on, I got another one too. I just love that she's on a catfish. So he sees her riding on a catfish and basically tries to get her attention the best way he can. Eventually, he gets to marry Slue-Foot Sue by allowing her to ride his horse, Widowmaker, which apparently he never lets anybody ride his horse. But
except his one true love. It's so romantic.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, it's romantic, all right. Poor Slue-Foot Sue. Hang on, where is my... First of all, do you know what Slue-Foot... I had to look this up because I was like, what on earth? So if you're into feet, get excited. There's pigeon toes, which are like turned in, normal toes, which are like forward, back and forth, and then slew-footed is like turned out. We also get major tie-ins with Sue in Pecos Bill Tall Tale Inn, which if you've never been in that quick service restaurant, think of it like a Planet Hollywood, but for all of your frontier legends, including there's artifacts from all of these folks, which here's a picture of Slue-Foot Sue on the outside, or not the inside, on the inside of the restaurant. And next to it is a pair of her gloves, which says, "To Billy, all my love, Slue-Foot Sue." So a nice little tie-in in Frontierland here in Walt Disney World in that quick service, which is probably the only reason to go in that quick service anyway, because that food has changed dramatically. Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh.
I gave it another try recently, and I was like, nope.
Yeah. Dude, the nachos are actually pretty good. I had them not that long ago, and I was like, all right, this is actually pretty good. All right. Another reason, though, that Slue-Foot Sue agrees to marrying Pecos Bill is because she can wear a bustle. Do you know what a bustle is?
Yes, of course.
I didn't know what a bustle was.
A woman's garment. And bustle, isn't it the one that kind of like makes your backside bigger?
Yes, but hang on. So yes, he says she could go and buy a bustle, which is fancy, right? They were made out of so many different things. Like some of them were made out of whalebone. Like if you were really rich, the ribs would be made out of whalebone. Sometimes they'd be made out of iron. Sometimes they would be stuffed with like horse hair and could be like cushy. But basically, it was like a cage that would go against your posterior that you would belt on, and it would go underneath your dress to make it look like you had a big rump. So, like, back then, bustles were very popular for that.
And that's why Drizella and Anastasia wore on the dresses in Cinderella. So if you ever wondered why they had those, like, big bumps behind them, that's what they are. They're bustles.
Baby didn't have back. Baby had a bustle. That's all I'm going to say.
They did have back after they had
now in the queue. We don't get the horrible thing that actually happens to Sue, and I have to talk about it because her craving need to have in her wedding dress this posterior is her downfall, because she's riding Widowmaker, Pecos's horse, and she's wearing this bustle, and she falls off Widowmaker, who doesn't let anybody ride him. So like it's like as soon as she falls off, she bounces and just keeps bouncing and bouncing. And in the Disney version of it, she flies to the moon.
I think
so.
It's
he
not
never
just
even
Disney. I think that is like the tall tale that she.
No.
Yeah. No.
The tall tale is
like
way worse.
Really?
The tall tale is way worse. Yes. As soon as well, Widowmaker bucked like a maniac, just as you'd expect. Sue was thrown off clear up into the clouds. Luckily, Sue was still wearing her springing hoop. When she hit the ground, she bounced up and down again. But all soon realized Sue couldn't stop bouncing. She bounced so high she kept hitting her head on the moon. She was crying and crying, buckets of tears and throwing kisses to her new husband. But even he couldn't stop her bouncing. This is where it gets grim, kids. We waited 3 days and 4 nights. Finally, even Bill realized she was going to starve to death before she stopped bouncing. So he had to shoot her. It was a crying shame. Well, time heals wounds, and Bill finally got married again, and again, and again. But I'm telling you, he never felt the same about another woman as he felt for his first wife, Slue-Foot Sue.
That's not the version I remember.
That is messed up. Yeah, this is like the
version.
No. This is like the actual tall tale version, which was written in the early 1900s. So, yeah, it's so funny though, right? Isn't that crazy? Bill shot his own wife because she was gonna,
he was
the things we do for love.
Oh gosh, that is awful. But that's not the Disney version, which I think was 1948 was when the Disney version came out of Pecos Bill.
What's even crazier is the murder weapons are in Pecos Bill Tall Tale Inn and Cafe. His pistols are there. That's not a joke. That's crazy.
But he didn't do it in the Disney version, right? It was just like kind of wild and crazy kind of guy. So.
Okay. Listen. If Disney told the story about some awful maniac, but left out all the details of them being an awful maniac, but then had some of the weapons from the awful maniac, wouldn't you think that's a little odd?
Well, there's a lot of Disney stories that Disney's changed over the years from what their original version was. There's a lot of grim things like Cinderella and her shoe. The way she got her foot in her shoe, like we won't get into because, but it's...
How'd she get her foot in her shoe?
No, I'm not going to talk about it.
I'm serious. Why? What'd she do?
Well, I don't think it was Cinderella that
me later?
did it.
Is it bad?
Well, I don't know if it was Cinderella or I haven't read that version of it in a long time, but I know that there was somebody was trying to like remove parts of their foot to get their foot to fit in the shoe. That
wasn't like one of the stepsisters to do it?
It might have been one of the stepsisters. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've read that version. I study the Disney one.
It was the stepsisters. Yeah. They cut the heels off? Ew.
Yeah.
Ew.
So not all these tales are like super cheery, and that's what actually Walt Disney got a lot of criticism because he changed the story so much and made it watered down. It made it family friendly essentially, so that it wouldn't be horrifying for children. Shame on him.
Oh my gosh! When I used to teach world cultures, speaking of like horrible foot things that people did for like beauty or fame or whatever.
Oh yeah,
Chinese foot binding was the craziest.
Yeah.
It was literally, if you've never seen this before, like I'm using my hand to demonstrate, but you basically are like folding over and wrapping your foot to make it smaller, like very, very tiny, extremely painful. And they did it to tons of little girls. It was awful practice for a very long time. And it wasn't even pretty. It was just what the royalty thought was attractive based on, it was like a dancer or something. And but it was crazy. Absolutely crazy. Anyway.
Yeah.
Oof.
Don't go with the trends. And also, tall tales are tall tales. So I think they did change it an awful lot for the Disney version. But it is interesting how much Pecos Bill is also tied in here. Like the Apple Dumpling Gang is also tied into the queue here at Big Thunder, which I think is really fun, especially because you do have Pecos Bill Tall Tale Inn and Cafe over there in Walt Disney World and Frontierland. So that's neat. There is a third notice on here if we want to touch on that real quick. There's a note.
Let's touch on it.
There's a note from Spike Landrum that says, looking for a new roommate who doesn't snore or eat beans. So, that seems like a reasonable ask. Beans.
The musical fruit.
I did try to find the name Spike Landrum and try to figure out where that came from. The only person that I can guess that it's about, it might be Imagineer Gary Landrum. who was a miner when he was in high school. He was a miner on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad and worked there. But then he became really big in the Disney company for Imagineering. And now he does Show Awareness Production Associate is his title, and does collections for Walt Disney Company. So that's, that could be a reference to that Imagineer just because of his ties to Big Thunder and wanting to reference that. But I don't know for sure. So that's speculation.
Also, he has no problems with soluble fiber.
Yeah. All right. So from here, we head into the ventilation room. Are we ready to go there?
How far are we going? Because I feel like we're getting to a point where it's like another 40, 45.
Yeah. Do we want to pause there and then wrap it up next week for the queue?
I think we'll get close next week. I'm not kidding. I think we might need 2 more episodes.
Oh my goodness. This queue. This
Dude,
is when we got
I don't know.
one.
I didn't realize that we were going to become literally mining experts by the end of this. But you know what? This is a testament of all of the really cool artifacts. And again, I know there's some incongruencies in terms of timelines, but it's still really fun to like go Disney antiquing with us. So
Yeah, for sure. I think this is really fun to know all the tiny little details, where they came from, what the history is. And it does give you a broader context for mining in general, and then the story of Big Thunder, because it's all about that. So,
dude, tell me, if they've done Pirates and it crushed, they did Jungle Cruise and it did well, you're telling me Big Thunder doesn't have a good enough, rich enough of a story, especially if they went with like the Paris version? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't. It's so good. It's so they could make such a great live action or animated of this. I mean, I would call for a live action because I think it would.
I thought they had one in the works, didn't they? Like back in 2022.
There was, but you know how it is. It's like a lot of projects come and go.
I think they could make an amazing one for it, and I do think the only thing that I'm a little bit disappointed about, and we'll talk more about this when we get there, but I'm a little bit disappointed that people don't fully understand exactly what's happening in the third lift hill with this version of it. And so I'm hoping eventually they sort that out and make it more obvious in some way, because I think they could. They had the technology to really, even just sticking with the idea of the geyser erupting. Imagine the cool things they could do.
Like
with that.
if they did some like water up the sides or faux water, like even if it's like just a spraying, like a steamy kind of foggy thing, like with like lots of like, or what would be really cool is if they somehow, like, even if they did projection mapping across the way where it looked like water was coming in all over the mine, and then.
And they could even use effects where it's like they're spraying some water over you and a couple of drips fall on you too. Like they could do so much with it.
Yeah. Because nobody gets that. Nobody has any clue. Everybody just thinks you're going up the mine again. Right.
And there's like a couple of rocks in like projections that are falling somewhere. And it was like, no, nobody, most people don't even notice that. It's very sad. But, well, I hate to say it, but I think we do stop there and pause there and then get into the ventilation room next week.
There's too many birds. By the way, I thought I was an ornithologist before. I know the anatomy of birds way too much now. And they're amazing, by the way. So I'm excited for next week.
Yeah, so I think that's it. Shall we wrap it up?
Let's pull this train into the station.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Distory. We hope you enjoyed looking into all these mining practices and the Explosives magazine room, looking down the subterroscopes and finding all these tiny little details of storytelling that most of us miss as we're running through the queue. Kirk, do you have anything you want to say as we wrap up here?
If baby wants back, don't buy it, because she'll bounce right into the moon.
Her bustle might be the end of her. That sounds very dangerous.
She wanted that bustle and a hustle, and then it got her into a tussle.
Don't let your vanity launch you to the moon. Just saying.
That's true. That's true.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. We appreciate you as always, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Distory.